I thought, since that was such a big thing today, and sometimes I like to try to get stuff like that into a scriptural context. So, because it's all connected, it's just figuring out the connections. And so this came to mind, and I just wanted to share this with you tonight. We'll do the Bible study next week. And I was trying to think, like I said a minute ago, the harder a nation pulls away from God, the more evil is released. And and it's one thing to be in a nation where evil is released, but people have a foundational knowledge of truth. And then they recognize, we know what to do, we know what's right, but we're just going to do what we want. Okay? You can actually work with that because they've got something to repent to. Our nation's not like that anymore. We've got 2, if not 3, generations who have no clue what is true. None whatsoever. In fact, the youngest generation has been taught there is no truth. There's only what you want to be true. Your version of reality is reality. And that's what comes under that worldview of postmodernism, is the idea that nothing exists, that everything's an illusion, everything's perception. And so that's what you're seeing right now. That's all the transgenderism foolishness and all that other stuff. Are the furries. Have y'all seen the furries? Heard about them? You haven't seen them? Okay. These are young people, for the most part, who like to dress up like animals and say stuff like, I relate to a lamb, and they may have lamb stuff on, or I relate to a dog or whatever, and they have dog ears. And it's just wild stuff. But see, they've been taught you are whatever you call yourself. Okay? And so that's some of what you're putting up with, because a lot of these people have been told all their life, you're special, you're wonderful, whatever you want, you get. We'll never tell you no. And they get to be adults and they run into that word no for the first time and they can't handle it. So I was thinking about it today, and this passage came to mind. Romans 1, Paul's opening his textbook on not only salvation, but it's his textbook describing the Christian life. This is his commentary, the most extensive writing he gives to this. And he gives it to the church in Rome, which was a church he had never visited. He heard about it. He knew nothing about it other than in, I think, his second or third missionary journey. He heard about this church, and it must have been second. And he wanted to go there. But he hadn't been able to go there yet. The Lord hadn't released him to go there yet. And so once he heard about it, he knew nothing about who was leading it. He knew nothing about what they were preaching and teaching. He knew nothing about how large it was, but he assumed it was probably an influential church. But one thing he did know, it was located in the most important city in the world at that time. And so he knew that church would more than likely be a significant player in church history because of where they were located, because they were going to get power, simply because of where they were. They would be given significance. And we know from history that was true, that by the end of the 3rd century, you had 4 major church centers. One was in Rome, the other was in Antioch. There's one in Egypt. I forget where the 4th one was right offhand. But these were the major church centers. And so of those 4, Rome emerged as the premier over these others. Well, when the Muslims invaded, they destroyed 3 of those 4, leaving only the Roman church. And so that's how the Catholic Church became so powerful, was they were the only ones left. So that's who he's writing to. He's writing to the Romans, a church he knows nothing about, doesn't know who's leading it, doesn't know who's what they're teaching, doesn't know anything about their doctrine, nothing. And so before he gets there, he writes Romans. And so basically what Romans is his commentary on what is the Christian faith. And so he starts off in the first 7 chapters talking about the problem. And then the last 8 chapters or 9 chapters, he's revealing the solution. Okay? And so he's going to start off with the problem. This is part of the problem. Verse 18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against, well, first of all, notice he said there, the wrath of God is, not will be. So we're seeing that wrath throughout history, and especially right now. So the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against what? All the godlessness and wickedness of people who do what? They suppress the truth. So what does suppress mean? You don't have an official definition, but just when I say suppress, what do you think? Cover it up, mash it down, try to hide it. Okay? All right, so before you can try to hide something, you got to know what it is. Okay? So he's not talking about ignorant people here. In fact, he's going to say later, if you look at creation, you're accountable to God. Because there's enough, and that actually gave rise to something called natural theology that we don't buy into, but not to the degree they do. But natural theology said you don't really need the Bible, that people can get saved just looking at nature and the complexity of nature, which I would disagree with, but anyway. But he said these are people, the wrath of God is being revealed against them because they are suppressing the truth. How are they suppressing it? By their wickedness. Now, what is wickedness? Ungodliness? Okay. And wickedness is often associated with rebellion. That they know what to do right, but they just don't do it. So they're going to do what they want to. So he said it's against those who suppress the truth in their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, nothing hidden. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So, right there, Paul affirms creationism because this world was created. To me, I don't, for the life of me, understand how somebody can believe evolution with a straight face. Now, I know they like to throw in scientific sounding terms. It makes it sound sophisticated, and they want to get you to question, could God create all this? Well, when you consider, if you strip away all the fancy language and everything else, what they're saying is nature created nature. Now, I don't know about you, but if that's true, then evolution would still be going on, right? I mean, nothing would have stopped it. Okay, where are all these partial humans today? Where are all these evolving life forms today? See, when you put a little weight on that, it just totally collapses. But here's the appeal of evolution. At the time, when Darwin didn't come up with it, by the way, there's a man named Spencer that actually came up with it. Darwin stole his idea, threw a little stuff in it, and published a book. And because he had the backing of a bunch of wealthy British industrialists, he was able to fund his research. And their motivation, if you ever see the full title of the book, it's not Origin of the Species. In fact, it's so long I'd have to look it up to read it all. But part of the title is the war for survival between the most favored peoples or something along those lines. In other words, it's racist. And the reason why it was racist was they were trying to come up with a rationale that sounded enlightened for slavery and how they treated people like in India and Africa and places they were colonizing. And they used the excuse, we're helping them evolve as we steal all their stuff. Okay? That's just kind of the price they have to pay for evolving, is we're going to steal all their stuff. But that was what was behind all this. But people will sit there with a straight face and they'll say, oh, it's all about evolution. You know, one day in the middle of nothing, suddenly things popped and appeared. And I'm just like, come on. And then in just the right place at just the right time in the universe, poof, there was Earth. And Earth had nothing living on it. So even if you go with their narrative through the first stages of, well, there's just water, and then there's land, and there's just sea creatures, and then all of a sudden, well, I'd like to know where the sea creatures came from. How do you get sea creatures out of rocks and out of sand? But they're good with it. Okay. So all these sea creatures are in there swimming around, and then one day, one of them decides, hey, I want to live on land. And so he crawls out of the water and gets up on land, and suddenly those lungs that could only breathe underwater miraculously change, and they can breathe air. And as these organisms evolved and changed and everything, all these new life forms were produced. That's, to me, like saying I believe in Santa Claus. Because if you strip away all this fancy language, that's what it is. That's what you got. But see, it was so popular at the time because those who were in the Enlightenment at that time, who were looking for some type of a worldview that they considered equally comprehensive to the Christian worldview, this gave them something to work with, because otherwise they had no version of creationism. And so when they published his book on this all created itself, they jumped on it. Okay, we got something now. Even though it's been disproved. Darwin's stuff's been disproved. And there's not many scientists anymore who would actually tell you they believe pure Darwinism, because a lot of his ideas were just speculation. And of course, most of his speculation was born out of the fact he was angry with God because his daughter died. And it was his way of giving God the finger. So, anyway, back to this. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, which are his power, divine nature, what's that? Intelligent design emphasizes that the characteristics of God we see in creation, like complexity, order, and those things, have clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So no one can stand before God one day and say, I didn't know. There's something instinctual in people. They're born with it, that knows there's a God or something greater than them, and they're disconnected from it. In fact, one of the early psychologists, Alfred Adler, said everybody's born with a sense of inferiority. What's wrong with me? And see, that's called that fallen nature that we got from Adam. When we're born in Adam, we've got Adam's genes, and Adam's genes are defective. Adam's genes knows when we're coming into this world, we're not where we're supposed to be. We're not connected with our Creator like we're supposed to be. So, he said he's been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. For although they knew God, well, by knew there meaning they can recognize, they can acknowledge, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. Did y'all see the thing today where they tried to get, I don't know if it's Congress or the House, to pray, have a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk, and the Democrats had a fit, objecting, screaming, no, no. That's this. Why, have you ever thought about this? You mention God to somebody on that side of things, and they get fighting mad. Why do you think they get fighting mad? They know it's true. They know you're right. I don't get mad if somebody tells me, you know, Santa doesn't exist. I don't say, come on, we'll fight over that. If I don't really believe in something, okay, whatever. And they may say, well, flip it around and say, you know what, I just saw Santa outside. Well, my response would be, who's in the suit? Because I don't believe in Santa. So, and it's just not going to get me upset when people talk about something I don't believe in. But if I believe in it and I'm just trying to live contrary to what I know, I'm going to get very upset. I'm going to get angry. So that's why they get so angry, is because they've bought in. Not only are most of them lost, but they've bought into a worldview that is very anti-God. And because of that, just the mere mention of God's name makes them angry. Yeah, they don't even have to hide it anymore. Okay, for although, well, let's see, I skipped one. They gave thanks, but their thinking, became futile. Futile means worthless, void. Their thinking. Now, I don't think he's not there referring to their ability to do calculus and things like that. That's not what he's talking about with thinking. What he's talking about is wisdom. Just like in Proverbs, when Solomon's talking about wisdom there, he's not talking about the ability to do algebra. He's talking about having an understanding of how life works, of what's true, what is reality, okay? And so what Paul is saying here is when somebody's in this condition, they know there's a God, but they've rejected him, they're living contrary to him, they're angry at him, they're in open rebellion against him, their thinking becomes futile. So watch the news, and you can see plenty of futile thinking. People think, boys thinking they're girls, girls thinking they're boys, people standing in front of the bathroom saying, do I use the boys or the girls? Well, today I'm feeling kind of girlish, so I think I'll go in that. That's all futile thinking. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Oh, so a darkened heart can't see the truth anymore. Notice he said they were darkened, meaning it's something that happened. It wasn't their original state. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. Have you noticed now, like in Canada the other day, they put up a Hindu god statue and people were worshiping it? So we're not talking about some primitive country in Africa or something like that. We're talking about Western Europe, over here. People openly engaged in Satan worship, putting up idols to Satan. Therefore, because of all this, okay, that's what therefore is there, is in light of or because of. Therefore, because of this, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. That's where all that comes from. Okay? They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. So Paul got excited there. He had to throw in a big amen, had to amen himself if no one else would. Because of this, okay, so because of what? Because God has turned them over. Notice in that verse, now he's going to add some things now, but what's the only thing he mentions there he's turned them over to? Sexual sin. Unrestrained sexuality. Okay? Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lust. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for this error. Now, what's the due penalty? All kinds of judgment. Okay. Furthermore, so he's adding on, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so they had it, but they thought it's not worth keeping because we're going to live our own way. We're going to do things our own way. God did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to what? To a depraved mind. Depraved means worthless, twisted, perverted. So that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. So we don't have enough already. They come up with new ones, new ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. Although they know God's righteous decree. Now, okay, again, he says they know it. They know God's righteous decree that those who do such things do what? Worthy of death or deserve death. They not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. So what I did is I just read the newspaper to you. So how did we get to this point? Well, because we do have a worldview. You've got somewhat of a world. I won't say it's a solid Christian worldview. It may be more traditional than Christian. But you got those who hold on to that versus those who hold on to what we might call progressivism or liberal. It's not really liberalism anymore. It's more progressive socialism is what it is. And so with that side, it's all about what? Do what you want. There's no God. That's at the very root of it. There's no God. There's nothing, no afterlife, because that's part of the naturalistic roots of postmodern. When you think of postmodernism, don't zone out, okay? Because postmodernism as a philosophy and worldview is like beef stew. It's got a little bit of everything cut up in it. So there's some naturalism in it. There's some spiritualism in it, if you like that. There's some Marxism in it, if you like that. There's a lot of nihilism in it, which is life is meaningless. So all this mixes up and produces this postmodern approach to life. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a postmodern approach to life on display. And that's why it's mostly younger people who are into this. It's because it was introduced in the 90s. And like every idea, new idea that comes on the scene, it has a birth, it has a maturity phase, it has a high point where it produces fruit, and then it gradually runs out. And so we're at the point in the stages now where postmodernism's producing fruit. It will eventually run out. As the president said yesterday, the woke thing comes under postmodernism. He said woke's all but dead. But it's got deep roots, so we got to keep working. And that's what's going to happen with postmodernism. It's going to run out. The question is, what then? Yeah, because there's nothing left. If you look back over the history of things, when the Enlightenment took place, the new thinking was through human reason, through a human ability, through new discoveries and science and things like that. Naturalism, we're going to create the perfect world. We're going to create a world where everyone can experience a life of meaning and purpose. Well, the Enlightenment ran its course and then kind of fizzled out. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, and that kind of re-sparked it. And then we go into what we call modernism in America, which is the early first half of the 20th century, where you had a lot of new inventions, a lot of advances in technology. You can thank 2 world wars for that. And so one of the things that modernism promised, we're going to give you a better life. You're not going to need God. You just need human reason. You need ingenuity, creativity. Trust the science. Trust that technology is going to do it for you. They're going to make life easier. And when they make life easier, you'll discover purpose and meaning in life.
What's next? Pray that what's next is people who are so-called enlightened, intellectual, worshiping demons.
Uh-huh.
Going back to idol worship, going back to pagan religions.
Mm-hmm.
You have Christianity that won't accept it. They won't accept it. They got to have something else. And once they see that other people have to have something spiritual, where does it go?
Yeah, but we're praying.
Well, I know, but I think in the midst of it too, there will be great awakening and revival.
Yeah,
I think there will be a lot of people, but you're always going to have people
Oh, yeah.
that will reject the truth.
Yeah.
And where do they go?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, it really is like Charles Dickens said. It's the best of times and the worst of times. And those two usually run together. So you have what God's doing in the earth, and then you're going to have what Satan's doing in the earth. And so what God's doing is going to get better and better. What Satan's doing is going to get worse and worse. And we haven't seen anything yet until AI is up and going full speed. And boy, it's going to get weird then. Because a lot of things you might watch today that you think are real people aren't. And they're just AI generated. And AI is getting so good that they can actually convince you now. Used to you could pick it out because it was kind of jerky and the colors weren't right. But they're getting real good at it now. And they can make, in fact, it's got people in Hollywood nervous because they say it's just a matter of time. We won't need any of you. Won't need actors, won't need writers, won't be producers, won't need any of that.
And those little AI, they'll do anything that the imaginations of the directors and all them will want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, on a more hopeful note, we'll
Mhm.
the hopeful side of things.
Yeah.
What you were
So I'll wrap it up with this. Keep in mind when you're praying for folks that they may, what we're praying for, they instinctively know, but they may not see. And so when you're dealing with somebody that really does need salvation, keep in mind until they see it, it makes no sense. It's just foolishness. So be praying that God will open their eyes so that they see it. And if they see it, they can't unsee it. They may not accept it, but they can't unsee it. And that's the key to the whole thing. Because if the Spirit doesn't draw, they're not saved. So that's where we want to be, is, Lord, show us who you're working on, or who you want us to be praying for that you're going to start working on. And if you interact with people very much, you can pick up on that. You pick up on those that God's working on and those he probably isn't at that time. So anyway, that was just some random thoughts in light of what happened today. But because I think it's very much a description of where we're